Hello, everyone, and welcome to the workshop, the European Language Grid workshop at the B2B Software Days. My name is Dagmar Grohmann, and I'm from the University of Vienna and have the pleasure to co-organize this event with Gerhard Backfried from Hensoldt Analytics. We also have support, very kind support by Barbara Heinisch to help us with the Q&A and polls that we will do during this workshop. And we also would like to thank Gerhard Sedelbauer from the Vienna Business Agency for allowing us to be here and supporting us a lot in organizing and getting this workshop on the road. So we will start with an introduction to ELG, then talk about ELG chances and demands presented by Gerhard Backfried. The introduction will be done by Georg Rehm. I will briefly give an insight into one of the ELG pilot projects, and then we will hear about Austrian speech technology and Austrian machine translation from an industry perspective by Andreas Rath and by Klaus Fleischmann. We will start with a poll straight away, asking you about your experience with language technologies. And while the poll is running, I will hand over the screen to Georg Rehm. And stop sharing right now. Okay, so thank you very much for sharing your slides, and thank you so much for presenting the European Language Grid to the B2B Software Day participants today. Georg Rehm is the project leader of a very large Horizon 2020 project called European Language Grid that targets to provide a platform for language resources and language technologies in Europe, and he will tell us all about this straight away. So Georg, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks very much, Dagmar, for the introduction. And in the next round, about 25 minutes, I will give you a brief overview of the European Language Grid and one slide on its sister project, European Language Equality. So I will start with a bit of history and context, which I think is crucial and important to the presentation and the project and the initiative that we are presenting in this workshop today. The main part of the presentation will be on the European Language Grid platform and initiative. And as I said, one slide on a new sister project that we recently kicked off. And I will conclude with a summary and some next steps. So our point of departure today in this workshop is multilingualism in Europe. You all know that multilingualism is at the heart of the European project, of the European idea. In addition to the 24 official European Union member state languages, which all have the same status, we have dozens of co-official languages, regional languages, minority languages. Some of them are endangered. And also we have languages of immigrants and trade partners. This creates a big hodgepodge of languages and this rich linguistic fabric that we have in Europe. Out of this fabric come a couple of challenges: economic challenges, social challenges, and technical challenges. Among others, and I'm only listing three here on the slide, the digital single market, one of the European Commission flagship projects of recent years, needs to be multilingual. If it's not multilingual, then we have various single digital markets, but a couple of them, not one. We have a couple of digital single markets strictly confined to their language silos, which is probably not a good idea. We have cross-border, cross-lingual, cross-cultural communication as a crucial social challenge. And in addition, we have a stark fragmentation of the European language technology market and landscape, and more on this in a few minutes. So language technology in a nutshell, in one slide, also known as natural language processing or natural language understanding. It is already everywhere, even though this name or this concept is not really prominently known. So language technology makes use of theoretical results of language-oriented research to create applications and technological solutions. Fields and areas involved in this are obviously AI, computer science, computational linguistics, but also the signal side, so signal processing, speech processing, and also related areas like psychology, psycholinguistics, cognitive science, linguistics as well, which is clear with regard to the topic. So language technology can also be broken down into language-centric AI these days. And a couple of applications are listed on the right-hand side, from spell checkers that have been around in Word and other word processors for decades, to machine translation, to web search. Language technology is everywhere. We've been working on this topic in a number of European projects now for more than 10 years. The idea was to take the opportunities that we have, also the challenges that we have in Europe, given the multilingual landscape, and to do something about it. Yeah, with the help of language technologies, to make use of this rich multilingual fabric and landscape and information society that we have in Europe, to use language technologies to fully enable and to empower citizens, companies, and so on. And our most recent endeavor is European Language Grid, together with European language equality. I still like to highlight these results because they're so evident and so obvious. Almost now 10 years ago, we did a large study. So please allow me to dive back into history here. 10 years ago, we did this study called the MetaNet Language White Papers, Europe's Languages in the Digital Age. We took a look at 30 European languages, the ones you see on the slide here, including all official European languages. And together with more than 230 colleagues from all over Europe, we assessed the level of technology support for these languages. And it turns out that there's no language that receives excellent support through technologies. There's one language that receives good support, that's English. And then there's a long tail of languages with moderate support, and then this large bunch of languages with fragmentary support or even weak or no support of languages. And this resulted then in the headline that we published on the Day of the European Languages, 26th of September 2012, that 21 European languages are in danger of digital extinction, as you can clearly see here on the slide. Yeah, so there's one language with good support and many languages with not so good support, and this creates an imbalance, obviously, which is strange given that all languages are supposed to be equal in Europe. We did this, as I said, in 2011, 2012. Support for many of the languages has increased and improved in the meantime, thanks to neural technologies, obviously, but the bigger picture appears to remain mostly the same. And we are trying to do something about this. A couple of years later, the European Parliament put forward this resolution called Language Equality in the Digital Age. Just the right topic. Yeah, we're talking about language equality now in the digital age. So the topics we are working on in these line of projects. And this paper, this resolution recommended to create a European language technology platform for sharing of services, among others. It was passed with 592 yes votes and only 45 no votes. That was a landslide result, which we are very happy about. So European Language Grid in a nutshell, what is it? The objective of this project, which is the currently biggest European LT project supported by the European Commission, the main objective is to establish the European Language Grid as the primary language technology platform and marketplace in Europe to tackle the fragmentation of the European LT landscape. Of course, we also want to do something about the other challenges that I mentioned at the beginning. So digital single market needs to be multilingual. We want to build a platform for commercial and non-commercial industry-related language technologies, both functional and non-functional. I'll explain in a minute what that means. And also we want to enable the whole European community to make their resources, their services, their data sets available, to deploy them through this centralized grid cloud infrastructure and to connect with and make use of those resources made available by others, with the consortium comprising these 9 partners shown on the slide. So we are already in the 3rd year. This is the project timeline, which I'm showing you first to highlight that we are in the 3rd year already. We have about 1 year left. We extended the project by half a year due to the pandemic. And also to stress that the bottom right corner here, that we are establishing a legal entity for the European language grid. Yeah, we will not switch everything off after the project runtime. Instead, a legal entity will take over operations, maintenance, extension of the platform, of the initiative, of the community, so that we really have a legal entity that takes care of the umbrella platform for the whole European landscape. It's about time that we do this because the landscape is very, very big and very, very fragmented, unfortunately. So this is as technical as it gets. In this presentation here, we have a pretty conventional, I have to say, architecture of the system. Yeah, so everything is running on a Kubernetes platform that runs in the data center of a Berlin-based cloud provider. We work with Docker and Docker images extensively. The whole platform itself is a bunch of Docker images, and all the different services that are coming in from our project partners, from third parties, the different processing services, from machine translation engines to specialized tools, to speech recognition tools, to speech synthesis, and many, many others. They are all individual Docker images that we can pull into the platform and deploy from the platform, which is really very nifty. So I will show you a brief demo here. This is a screencast that we did a while ago, a couple of weeks ago, for a paper. And you can see here the European language grid in action. Let me just switch off the ads here. So this is the landing page of the European language grid cloud platform. You can go into the different pages here, so listing all the language technologies that we have in the platform, the different data sets and resources, or into the community, or you can simply hit this big pink button here in the middle that says search or explore the catalog. If we do that, so given that we assume that you are an organization that knows that there is a certain need for language technologies, say for machine translation, for speech recognition, then you can go to the European language grid and you will find all the services that we have in Europe, all the data sets that we have in Europe, all the companies and research groups that we have in Europe. At least that's our ambition. So right now you can see we have about 4,000 different entities or resources in the catalog. Right now we are looking at corpora. Now we are looking at specific corpora, named entity recognition corpora, which you can check out. These are metadata, rich semantic metadata on the different corpora. And depending on the access conditions, you can already download the corpora from the grid. We have lots of storage available in the infrastructure. So it's possible for third parties, for companies, for research groups to package data sets, to upload them to the European language grid and to make them available through the ELG. This is now what we call a functional service. So it's an actual tool that you can use from the grid. It's a Docker image that runs in our infrastructure. You can include in this web interface here some example input. You can hit the submit button and you can check out how the software performs. This is now sentiment analysis from one of our project partners for the English language. And this is all working very, very nicely. This is now named entity recognition for the French language, and we can even highlight annotations here. Yeah, and we have hundreds and hundreds of these services in the platform already, and it's growing by the day. And here's another example. This is machine translation from English to German with another example. And I will just fast forward a little bit. This is an example, morphosyntactic analysis that shows that we can even expose nice interactive graphical interfaces to the user. So if you're into morphological analysis, you can dive into these dependency graphs here. This is not everything. You can only access the ELG services through code, obviously. And this is an example where we can do this using the command line. We are also working on a Python system or a Python software development kit that enables easy access through the ELG services through Python. Just a couple of lines of code, and you can access ELG services, which makes integration and prototyping, of course, very, very simple, very, very easy. Right, so I will skip here, I guess, because I will talk about the rest in more detail. So what can you actually do with it? I think the demo showed most of the functionality already. Data consumers, so organizations or researchers or industry colleagues can search and browse the ELG catalog if they are interested in certain data sets. For example, we as DFKI, our team, we've made available recently a data set for named entity recognition in German language legal documents, which is very specific, but there's a big need for this. So you can easily find this through the European language grid. Service consumers can have multiple APIs, can test out these language processing services through ELG, through API support. They have code samples, we have explanation videos, and so on and so forth. And of course, providers can also make their data and services available. This is a piece of Python code here. So if Python is your thing and you would like to check it out, go to this GitLab URL here. And these are essentially it's 2 lines of code, three lines of code, so that you can attach. This is a machine translation service from Polish to English, I think, yes. Which you can use then right away, which we think is really nifty. So who are our main target audiences, or who are our main stakeholders? We primarily cater for companies that develop language technologies, that integrate language technologies, and that purchase language technologies. Yeah, so the supply side and the demand side. And the same goes for academic organizations, universities, and research centers that develop language technologies or use language technologies. And let's skip the others for now, because this is the main action here. So European LT industry is very big. It's very fragmented. What we've done recently is we did a large landscaping exercise together with our national competence centers. Dagmar is representing the Austrian branch of ELG, the Austrian National Competence Center. She also participated in this exercise, and we tried to find all the different companies in Europe that work in this field and work in this area. And we, together with our 32 national competence centers, we found approximately 900 companies working in Europe. I'm pretty certain that we haven't found all of them, but maybe, let's say there are about 1,000 companies working in this space, which is quite a lot. And of course, we want to bring all of them into the European language grid. And we bootstrapped the ELG catalog with this large list of companies. Graphically, it looks like this. So in Germany, we have about 100. And then again, usually the usual situation in Europe, there's the long tail in terms of the distribution. And what we've done recently is we reached out to all of these companies and said via email, and we said, hello, this is the ELG project and platform. We took the liberty of creating a page for your organization in our catalog. You can take over, you can claim your page and now take over and populate your page with resources, with services. And that was working out quite nicely. So by now, over 20 companies have done that, and more each day. Yeah? So they are pouring in, and they are already uploading their resources. And we are pretty confident that the snowball effect will come any day now. Yeah, so this is working really nicely. In addition to the main stakeholders that I just mentioned, we, of course, have many other projects and initiatives we collaborate with. I will skip the fine print here and just want to highlight the pilot projects, which I will go into more detail in a minute. So the national competence centers are an important piece of our project, an important piece of the puzzle to get the reach into the different countries, into the different regional areas where we also want ELG to be a success. The 32 national competence centers are a strong international network of national networks to broaden our reach, to identify content, to identify players and stakeholders to use ELG. Yeah, so they support the mission of the ELG project. And as I mentioned here, number 1 on the list, Austria, that's Dagmar Grohmann from the University of Vienna. Again, thanks, Dagmar, for taking over this role. We are very, very happy to have you, and also thankful that you organized this workshop today with Gerhard. So we also organize a conference series, have been since 2010. Some shots from the good old days when we could still have face-to-face conferences. Last year it was virtual. Good side effect is that we could record everything, and it's all available on YouTube. So if you're interested in more details around the European Language Grid, please feel free to check out this easily memorable URL here. But you can also find it through the YouTube search if you want to check out the European Language Grid Conference Metaforum 2020. Another activity in this project, which is crucial for the overall success, is our pilot project part and branch in the project. So we set aside about 2 million euros in the project to support pilot projects. And all in all, we received way over 200 project proposals for our 2 open calls, which both ran last year. And through a highly competitive evaluation with experts, we had each proposal checked and evaluated by 3 experts, independent experts. We selected 15 projects in these 2 rounds of open calls, 3 of them from Austria, highlighted here. And they represent, the whole spectrum of language technology, from corpus creation, dataset creation, like the first one, European Clinical Case Corpus, to interactive assistants, like the 4th one, Buzz Speaking Smart Speaker based on Mycroft AI, to MT and translation models, to terminology, to prototypes of virtual personal assistants, and so on. Yeah, so, and we are now finishing up the first batch of projects from the first round, and I'm very, very curious to see their results. So, of course, this is not a closed shop. We want this to be an open platform, an open ecosystem in a way. Yeah, so we want to integrate not only stuff that we financed as ELG, the pilot projects, or provided by our consortium partners. We want to ideally bring in resources and services from all European players in this landscape, right? And just as an example, we have one project curator, which is coordinated by DFKI, and we are now also in the process of bringing in these results, into the ELG platform. What does it mean? We can easily create a page for this project, which you can see on the left. When you go to this slightly faint link here, related entities, you can see a list of all the resources that this project helped create. Yeah, so everything created, financed by this project money. As you can see in the middle, it's only 2 services here, just as an example, 2 NER services for German and English. You can click on them, and then you can access them either through the web interface or through the APIs. Yeah, and we can do the same thing for any European project, and we hope that it will be a very popular infrastructure and dissemination channel and sales channel for companies as well. I mentioned the legal entity at the beginning. So this is supposed to be a long-term sustainable initiative. We are creating this legal entity. There are certain technical and operational requirements. As you can imagine, this infrastructure alone is creating non-trivial costs. Then there needs to be a team to take care of everything. And it looks pretty likely that this will be a not-for-profit company, given that it's also a community service in a certain way. We have the business model canvas prepared. It's pretty good, pretty stable, and we are now specifying the different products, and we will then validate them with relevant players from the market. And then in about a year, the legal entity will be established, and then it can take over in July 2022. I promised you a brief glimpse at this project here, our sister project, European Language Equality, ELE, which is a huge project, huge in terms of partners, 53 partners from all over Europe, coordinated by our friends at Adapt Center in Dublin City University. Andy Way is the coordinator, together with us at DFKI. The objective is, this project is more strategic. This is more the development of a strategic research, innovation, and deployment agenda to achieve digital language equality in Europe by 2030. We've seen at the beginning of the presentation that there is a stark imbalance in terms of technology support. We want to change that. We want to create language equality, digital language equality. It will take a while. Our goal is by 2030. And in this project, we are developing a plan how to do this. And this plan is now being prepared. There will be many consultation events, many surveys. If you happen to stumble upon such a survey, if you happen to be invited to such a survey, please support this and fill it in with your needs and with your ideas and with your demands. Both projects will finish up then in June 2022. So, last slide. As a summary, we want with ELG to establish this platform as the primary platform and marketplace for language technology in Europe. This is not a closed shop or a closed thing. It's an initiative from the European community for the European community. Why are we doing this? Because the landscape is highly, highly fragmented. Many of these companies are SMEs. Many only have 20 or 30 employees, and many operate in niches and geographical niches and in market niches. And we think that if we help them create larger reach throughout Europe, this will be unleashing quite a lot of potential. And we want to have ELG as the right umbrella platform for this. The global market size by 2025 is huge. It's enormous. According to the most recent study, it's $42 billion US. $42 billion in natural language processing and speech. And we want Europe to be a key player in this market. We want to increase the visibility and reach of all members of the European landscape. And we are creating a legal entity for sustainability purposes. And we want to create, also obviously contribute to this goal of creating language equality, digital language equality in Europe. Of course, ELG plays a certain role in these plans, obviously. Next steps are, we just released ELG Release 2, as we call it. So the intermediary release of the platform with 280 or so functional services and about 3,000 or 4,000 resources. And the final release in the project runtime will be made available early 2022. There are a couple of papers and documentation. If you're interested to dive into this, you can also check the YouTube channel and hit the subscribe button if you're interested. There will be a book coming out on ELG. There will be another book coming out on ELE. But for this, it will take a bit more time. Thanks very much for your attention, for your interest in the topic. Thanks very much again to Dagmar, also to Gerhard, our project partner, to the pilot projects represented in the workshop today. And I'm happy to take questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Georg, for this excellent presentation and overview of ELG, and actually quite in-depth presentation of what ELG is in such a short time.
Scratching the surface.
I think we have time for at least one question. Yusuf was the first who asked, if a company wants to sell its products in 24 languages, what is the best way to do that?
What kind of product? Do we know this? I guess it's a digital product.
Let's assume it's a digital product.
Yeah. So a hotter and hotter topic is automated website translation. Yeah. So this could be an approach. It depends a bit on if it's a product that comprises maybe 10 web pages or maybe 10 million web pages. Could be an e-commerce shop with millions and millions of product pages. But machine translation could be a viable instrument here. Maybe machine translation in addition with post-editing. Yeah, so post-editing machine translation output could also be done on a case-by-case basis. We can even throw in quality estimation tools so that automated tools tell us which pages to check and then to post edit. Yeah, maybe the ones that have been translated not that correctly.
Okay, and one second quick question by Vincent. Is it possible to make a distinction between services offered for everyone, for non-commercial users only, for paying users only? Is it possible to make such a distinction on the ELG?
Yeah, we have a rich metadata set. It's very, very rich and semantically described with a built-in ontology, so we can enable faceted search. We have the licenses, of course, represented, and in a nutshell, we can do this. Yeah, we can do this. Of course, we want to not really distinguish between commercial, at least for trying out different things. So right now we are in a phase where we enable access to all services, even the commercial ones, but they are throttled and there's a bottleneck and volume limits essentially, but they can all be tried out.
Okay. And do you have a very quick answer to the question whether the data sets are checked against bias, asked by Georg?
Yeah, right now we are not making any assumptions with regard to the incoming corpora. We are doing functional checks, but no quality checks. That would not be feasible, given that the bias discussion, and there can be many different biases in a data set. In fact, there are many different biases. Some of them are not really wanted, while others are natural. Yeah, so there are natural biases and unnatural biases that you want to get rid of. And I guess the discussion, and given that the topic is very important, very timely right now, there will be approaches, but we are not developing them coming up in the next couple of years, so that this topic will be taken care of by the research landscape anyway.
Okay, so thank you so much. I'm afraid we have to take the rest of the questions offline. Thank you so much for your great presentation and for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just a quick info on the poll. So we have 90% here that have used language technologies before, 10% who haven't, and about 50-50 of people who have developed language technologies before and people who haven't. And without taking up more time of Gerhard's presentation, I will hand over straight to Gerhard Backfried from Hensoldt Analytics, who's also an ELG consortium partner, and will tell us about challenges and demands of ELG.
Thank you, Dagmar. And also a very nice welcome from my side. I hope the screen is visible, and it will be visible in full screen in just a moment. All right, so we've heard quite a bit about the ELG and what it is today. Some of these messages I think you'll be hearing again and again. And can you see the presentation in full screen mode, or yeah? Okay. So one of the, I think, almost mantras of the ELG today is it's the one-stop shop for language technologies in Europe. It really is meant to funnel, to focus, to condense, to collect a lot of different energy, a lot of different activities, technologies, and actors in a single place to turn to, a one-stop shop really to go to from a demand side as well as from a supply side. Mentioning supply and demand, we used to be an SME until the beginning of this year. We have, and it used to be called Say Labs, for those of you who know us from the past. Nowadays, we're called Hensoldt Analytics. We're not an SME anymore technically, but I think a lot of what I say here and about to say applies equally to small, medium enterprises, but also to larger enterprises. So let's get into it. From why would you, from a commercial side, even be interested in the ELG? First of all, and I think we've heard this quite a bit, it's a technology and resource hub. There are some active technologies, there's some services running, there are lots of resources that you can find, download, and do fantastic things with. That's the technical side. But on the other side, what the ELG is trying to establish is also a very vivid community, because there's no life in it. If there's only technology in it, there's no real life in it. It needs people, it needs a marketplace, it needs people to connect and hook up. And the idea, of course, is that this goes from two sides. On the one hand, we can contribute to the ELG. And as Georg already said, with the impressive numbers of what's already there, a lot of people have been contributing, uploading, depositing things on the ELG. But of course, we also want to use what's there. So you can benefit also commercially from storing, putting your things there, letting it run, but of course benefit from it if we want to go to yet another language and we don't have the technology or we don't have the resources to feed the technology. The ELG is one place to go and look for it. The networking, the sharing and connecting, the transactions, that's how it's going to live, because eventually if we're doing this from a commercial standpoint, there's the single digital market. There are other goals as well, such as not letting languages be extinguished digitally and giving them a chance. In other words, providing them on the same level of support, language equality. But of course, from the commercial side, eventually somebody has to pay for it, and people will only pay for it if there's value created. So the value creation and together creating value is a central element of the ELG. The community plays an active role, and the community, and I think this is a wonderful also statement here that Dagmar and I hopefully are giving to you, is one where academia and the industry work hand in hand and they work together. It's not different worlds. Yes, there are different goals, but both of these worlds in a way come together here. And that is also one of the fun things, I guess, about the ELG and one of the innovative aspects of the ELG. From talking to quite a number of people, we've heard that they're also looking towards the ELG to provide market intelligence, because it's a very fast-moving field. Even NLP is not NLP, but there are different facets and different parts of NLP. There are different levels of speed, but if you have been following the technologies over the last, let's say, 10 years or so, you have noticed some dramatic changes in the way of how things are done in the NLP community today, as opposed to, let's say, 10, 15, or 20 years ago. So having the ELG also provide this sort of insight, intelligence, a tech watch, being able to get information of what's coming, what's up and coming, what's robust enough, what's a technology fad, what is everybody's using AI today and everything has to be AI, but what's really the value? What can really be used? And especially if I come from an industry perspective and I'm looking at technologies or at resources from the ELG, I want to know, is it going to take me 2 years to get it to market, 5 years to take it to market, 2 months maybe only? So in other words, looking there to know what's up and coming, what's robust and what's tried and true and has been used in practice, and further on could be used for innovative actions. Georg already mentioned AI before, so AI for EU, the project, and NLP, natural language processing, as part of AI, because it is also intelligence, and what is more natural to interact with the system than through voice that we're normally used to do between humans as well. There's also been a project mentioned on sign language. I really like that approach as well, and that facet of it, but still language and being able to communicate, much as we would do with an intelligence companion, a colleague or a friend. That's in the center. The products, they can be used, or the ways the ELG can be used is to enrich existing products, or in other words, give them a new interface, give them a new functionality in a way. The ELG can be used to showcase capabilities and increase your exposure, your visibility, because presumably if you are there, if your profile is there, if your resources and your services are there, it's going to be looked up by a lot of people, and it's the central place in Europe. So supposedly this is a very good place to be when others come looking for expertise and technologies, and you're there. So showcasing your capabilities, that's already happening right now, but of course there's a lot of room in the future for more. The provision of custom NLP, there's lots of models around and lots of technologies around, but we already heard today that named entity recognition for the legal domain, that's quite a different beast than, let's say, named entity recognition in a football, soccer domain, sports domain. So the technology will take you somewhere, the models may take you somewhere, but on top of that, there might be some custom work needed and required. And again, the ELG may be the place to look for custom-made models. It may be the place in the community to find the experts that can help you develop these models and or the corpora, the data sets needed to create such models. The language coverage, I don't think we have to mention that specifically. We saw the curve, the long tail with the languages. If you want to go into a language, I don't know, support Finnish, for example, or one of the Baltic countries, you saw, or Maltese, I believe, was on the very far end of the line of the curve. Of course, having the technology, but extending it to yet another language, having the right resources and technology there, again, might be a good way to approach the ELG. Another one, of course, is you'll find language agnostic technologies there. Not everything has to be language specific, but it can still deal with language. So a component, for example, that deals with text goes in and it tells you even which language it is in. So language ID, first it's agnostic because it takes all sorts of text as input, but it tells you what the language probably is. And that, of course, then goes into a whole chain of other processing steps that are made possible by such technologies. And of course, again, we're going back to the market watch and the technology watch side, the benefit in current trends, always getting up to date. The idea is that the ELG, Georg mentioned it, does not end with the project. Actually, that's when its real life starts in a way. And hopefully it will be all the current trends and the further developments and everything that happens will be reflected also. And there are a lot of trends like democratization of machine learning, NLP and AI, open sourcing things, all of these trends, biasing and debiasing we had today already. So I haven't done any specific work, but that could be done as well there. So all of these trends, I would say, in AI and natural language processing will hopefully be reflected in the resources and in the crowd, in the community that's available, that's present. The community, talking about that, so seeing the ELG as a new channel, as a new sales channel to get your message, get your products, get your services out. That has been mentioned several times in little surveys that we did. On the other hand, if you're not an expert and you need an expert in a particular matter, I don't know, named entity recognition for, again, one of the Baltic countries, Estonian, for example. I don't know a lot of people working in that area, but one of the places to go to might be the ELG. So you can actually team up, you can find somebody, a subject matter expert, and then realize a project with that. Which also goes to the next point, the consortium building and the collaboration. I think I cannot stress the community part of the ELG enough, because technology, I think, is heavy and we know that and everybody wants it there, but the community, that's what makes it, that's what brings the technology in a way alive. So the building of groups, of consortia and collaboration is really important, and the ELG through the marketplace will offer that possibility. As an SME, if I think back a little bit, it helps you to extend your offerings and the wider scope. We also had the problem sometimes that we weren't, if you like, taken seriously as a small SME. We couldn't bid, we couldn't participate in larger projects because there was always the question, well, how can you participate in a project that is 10 times the size of your last turnover? Or maybe the one or the customer was thinking, well, they have good technology, they have good people, but will they still be there in a year or two? So I think extending the offerings by teaming up and reaching a larger audience and larger project sizes might also be a benefit. Pan-European partner brokerage, already said that. People and groups, that we have a lot of little pieces, bits and pieces spread out in Europe. So linking them together across Europe is very important. And of course, also attracting and retaining the talent, because we want to get people ideally from academia already using the ELG. And when they go into commercial life, they will take this knowledge and expertise and the tools with them, hopefully. And they won't, I mean, the one or other at least, won't join Google and Amazon and Baidu and, you know, what have you, all the large natural language processing companies, which are mostly outside of Europe, unfortunately, these days. The further benefits, of course, the sharing of resources and data, we already talked about that. Consulting, maybe also in a legal, maybe also in a business world. Legal could be something like data protection, but specifically data protection when it comes to data dealing with voices. You know, do I have can somebody use my voice? To what extent? Can I use somebody else's voice? Do they have an IP on their own voice? To what extent? How far can you go? That might be the one or the legal questions also associated, and I could imagine also legal experts, but legal with the scope of natural language processing, to be present on that marketplace. Education and events will very likely, I shouldn't say this is all cast in stone already, but it is ideas that we have been circulating. The ELG will also offer education events, webinars, further providing deep dives, deeper information in all the technologies, how they can be bundled, how they can be used up, how they can be combined. The raised awareness, of course, of our industry in Europe. Georg mentioned a huge number already. And then we have this huge, and Georg didn't put even a number, I think, on the slide, but it's this huge estimates of how big the market is going to grow. Just imagine being known to some, at least a small portion, a small percentage of that market, that you are an expert, that you could provide a solution, how much of a chunk of business that might actually generate in the end. The increase in visibility, we already said. The additional sales channel, this is what a lot of participants tend to view the ELG as. They see it as another way of selling their services, of selling their tools and their corporate, their data as well. And of course, the network effects and the compound, do things together and grow, scale up to an economy of scale is very important. The activities on the side of the ELG right now, and this again is just a course overview, is of course the brand has to be established and trust has to be created, because nobody's going to get on board if we don't provide a credible way forward, a credible story of why the ELG is what we claim it is and why the ELG will also be there tomorrow. And that's actually, you've seen lots of different initiatives on Georg's slides before. This is a small piece in a much larger mosaic, actually, of activities in Europe. And being part of that, being part of that, of course, is meant also to show a consistent, large, encompassing story. And we're part of that. The ELG is part of that. Growing the community and marketplace is already happening. We have wonderful and very interesting projects in the pilot section. So there are 2 different sets of pilots, and that's already actually growing the community. And I think there's hardly a month when the community is not growing, because there's always something going on, like the event today. And hopefully, while you're listening here, the one or other person is already thinking this might be something for me. And we're actively growing the community as we speak. That's really what I hope.
Oh, I'm afraid we lost the audio.
Back now?
Yes, now we can hear you again. You were gone for a moment.
So they've been put in, let's say, standard technology of state-of-the-art technology of today, and of course also providing high quality and robust components, because somehow we will also try and make very clear and transparent what somebody on the ELG is dealing with. If it might be the outcome of a student project, it might be the outcome of a commercial project, and they will obviously have different technology readiness levels, and that will be noted to some extent so people know what they're actually getting into, and they can actually have confidence when doing so. The ELG has been called a platform of platforms, so obviously what we don't want to do is replace everybody else and get them out of the way. No, the opposite, of course, is true. We want to actually connect different platforms and get them to join other initiatives and activities to join the ELG. A clear and transparent model of governance of licensing and billing, eventually also we're in for the money, if you're in commercially, will be provided. It is being worked on very thoroughly at the moment, and the goal clearly is to be the unique hub for NLP, also innovation in Europe. Talking about innovation, this is just a couple of slides now on how we see these many different types of innovation that can take place on the ELG. Really, it depends on where you as an entity position yourselves. I'm not going to go through all of these here, but just to point out there are different types of innovation that we expect. There might be the stepwise one that does it incrementally. There might be the one or the super cool idea that really provides a disruptive way of innovation. And there are many different benefits, of course, coming from those. Finding partners, we already talked about, finding technologies, aggregating, adding, and combining and creating value, I think is the one message that comes out of that. In the cycle, and I mentioned this briefly before, it is meant to also combine academia and industry. There's research, of course, on both sides. There's research in academia, but also in commercial and industry labs. We're not producing things for the ivory tower here, clearly, but what it gets produced and put into the ELG is meant to be used. It would be a shame if it was just sitting there and just, then silently disappearing at some point. Really creating it together and making it adopted in the real field. That's actually our intention here. And all of these groups, the research groups, the vendors, the aggregators and consultants, remember the marketplace also, and the buyers. There should be a room for all of them. There should be opportunities for all of them. So with this, I think I'm coming to the last slide already. To sum this up, we've also used the word snowball effect several times, because really what it means is we started now a couple of years ago already, as you heard from Georg, and it has a certain dynamic, a certain momentum. It, of course, sits on the shoulders of previous projects, but there are other projects already being started, like the ELV project, and keeping the momentum, actually increasing the momentum. If we're honest, that's our goal. So the reach of the participants, the ones who provide, the ones who use it, the ones who are on the marketplace, find each other, work with each other, provide their services and their expertise. That's a clear goal. The visibility of each participant should be increased, and it's pan-European collaboration. And even though we've been talking about Europe a lot, of course, the ELG is also interesting for somebody outside of Europe. First of all, if they want to use European languages. So whereas it is from Europe, by Europe, and for Europe, it is also for the outside world. Also, of course, partners outside can use it. And of course, we also have, as the European Union, some countries and languages around us that we...
Gerhard, I'm afraid your connection is gone again and your time is up as well. I don't know whether you can hear us or not.
Cultural. Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you again.
Okay, and actually this is the last slide. Mm-hmm. And with this, I'd like to thank you for your attention and hand back to Dagmar. Open for questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm afraid we don't really have time for questions right now.
I'll stop sharing right away, so maybe the connection is better then.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, so then we'll switch roles. And I have the pleasure to announce, as I just learned, the #1 NCC of the ELG herself, Ms. Dagmar Grohmann, who will share with us her insights and experiences. And I'm very much looking forward to that. Floor is yours, Dagmar.
Thank you very much. I'm only the #1 because I'm alphabetically the #1. So this is very much a coincidence. Now, for some reason, I can't see my screen right now. Just 1 second. Okay, hold on, sorry. So while I'm looking for my screen, please be informed that we will start a second poll to which we cordially invite you to participate, where we ask you about what you think of ELG and whether you think you'd be ready to participate in it. Okay, now I got it. Okay, sorry, so now it's not starting. Okay, so while I talk, please don't forget about the poll. Just switch in Slido from the questions to the poll to answer the question. So I will talk to you about one of the ELG pilot projects, which I'm happy to lead at the University of Vienna, which is called Extracting Terminological Concept Systems from Natural Language Text. Now, you all know what natural language text is, but maybe not all of you know what a terminological concept system is. So we'll just very briefly talk about this. And just a very abstract view on it. It's basically domain-specific terms in one or several languages. So we have something like vaccine in English, vacuna in Spanish, Impfstoff in German, and vaccina in Russian, and I won't try the Chinese. Then these terms are grouped by concepts. So you somehow try to organize within languages synonyms, but also across languages. And then you try to relate concepts to other concepts. So we have our vaccine concept that can be related to something like a biological preparation in a hierarchical relation. This can be read as vaccine is a biological preparation. Again, each concept in many languages. And it's called a generic relation in a terminology science world. And it can also be related to other concepts by other types of, for instance, also non-hierarchical relations, something like vaccine provides immunity, hopefully. And this is called an instrumental relation. So this is basically what a terminological concept system looks like. And it's there to structure existing knowledge and also acquire new knowledge. If you just look at this graph, you can already see the relations immediately. And it can also help to extend existing knowledge by adding new concepts to the existing structure. So from text, we exemplify it by looking at the sentence, a vaccine is a biological preparation that provides active acquired immunity to a particular infectious disease. The first step is to get all the terms, so to distinguish between terms and non-terms. In this case, we have vaccine, biological preparation, active acquired immunity, and infectious disease. The next step is to get relations. So in this sentence, for instance, we can get vaccine is a biological preparation, a generic relation. Vaccine provides active acquired immunity, instrumental relation. Vaccine has a thematic connection to infectious disease, which could be an associative relation, and many more. So this is what we try to do in the text to TCS project. We try to take plain text, text files, or text corpora as input, recognize which language the text is in, extract terms as a first step, group them by as synonyms in synonym sets, and then provide relations between synonyms. The output should be visualized as a concept system, as a graph, as you've just seen, or is visualized as a graph. And we also provide two formats. The one is the term-based exchange format, and the other one is which is very common in ISO and terminological circles. And then the other one is the resource description framework, which is the most common format in linguistic linked open data and linked data and semantic web technologies. So how do we achieve this? I can't go very much into details, but I can give you like a sneak preview. We use pre-trained language models, which wasn't the initial plan, but the most successful approach. We use the very famous BERT that's trained on plain text, basically a variant of BERT that's trained on large corpora of plain text, where you mask a word in a sentence, and then the network learns to predict this word. And then it's fine-tuned on a lot of different NLP tasks, such as multilingual, natural language inference, named entity recognition, question answering, and so on. Now, since BERT is monolingual and we want to work across languages and domains, we use a variant of BERT that is not only robust, but also strongly multilingual, supporting up to 120 languages, which is called XLMR, where R stands for Roberta. The approaches that we took to extract terms were three different ones. We used a sequence classifier. So you give the model all possible combinations of words in a sentence, and then also the sentence as a context, and you ask it to predict whether it's a term or not. In this case, random effect models has to be a term. The other thing is to give it the whole sentence and then let the model classify whether a single word is a term, a beginning of a term, or a continuation of a term. In this case, we have we is N, non, meta-analyzed is a term, mortality is another term, and then we have random effect models as a joint term, so beginning term, BT, and continuation term. And the third thing we tried was neural machine translation to basically just make a model called MBARD, forget all the things in the middle that are non-domain specific. All of these worked fine, but we had a clear winner, which was our token classifier. And we also used XLMR to extract relations. So we have a typology of relations that's pre-specified based on terminological standards and terminology science. And the model gets two terms that we previously extracted and then has to predict not only which relation of this typology it is, but also the directionality of the relation. So it's COVID-19 causing cough and not cough causing COVID-19. Of course, we also tried the neural machine translation model on this task, but the problem was that it is too slow in inference time, so the training is fine. It's always quite a bit of time with those models, but it's too slow at inference time. So the trained model takes a lot of time to tell us which relation it is. And it's also too large for the kind of infrastructure that we have available. So in the end, it is XLMR. And also some other additional steps to not only predict relations on a sentence level, but also on a text level. So this is all the details I can present today. I would like to, of course, thank my absolutely fabulous and fantastic team, without whom this would not have been possible at all. Leonard Wachowiak, who's our IT and cognitive science specialist, actually. Christian Lang, who's our translation and IT translation, machine translation expert. Barbara Heinisch, who's our terminology and usability expert, who makes sure that the final result isn't only usable, but also properly evaluated. So with this team, that the project has become a success, and I'm extremely thankful for all their work and their contributions. And this is it. So text to TCS will soon be on European Language Grid. If you have any questions or any remarks or comments for us, please do not hesitate to contact us. Okay.
Thank you, Dagmar. And let's see. We have the answers to the second poll. Are there any questions on the chat? I don't see any so far, so they might be coming up. No, confirmed. So they might be coming up later. We're good, doing good on time. So without much further ado, I will then pass the floor to Andreas Rath. Andreas is not only a technology expert, he's also a commercial expert, an entrepreneur, Mr. Ondevo himself. And I'll just pass the floor to you, Andreas.
Yes, thanks a lot for the great introduction. Today, I would like to talk to you about industry perspective on speech technology, and to give you a glimpse of what's possible and what's not yet possible. So quickly about Ondevo, so that you get a little bit an impression what the perspective on speech recognition and text synthesis technology from our point of view is. Ondevo builds the operating system for human-machine communication, including highly customizable speech-to-text engines, natural language understanding systems, and also text-to-speech platforms to create own artificial voices. Ondevo, a little bit of background, is a deep tech AI product company founded in Vienna in 2017. We started out with building chatbots and not really the solutions, but the technology platform. And soon we discovered that voice is actually the interaction of choice for a lot of customers and a lot of, in general, humans. No matter if it's talking to a robot, talking to a voice assistant like Siri or Google Assistant, or Alexa, or even a humanoid robot which is in front of you and you can discuss something with this artificial machine. We are mostly focusing at the moment in building a phone call automation product, which is what we think is one of the very difficult use cases to have in terms of natural language understanding and voice automation and text synthesis, because it needs to be real time. So at Ondevo, we build an end-to-end platform, which is multi-language, multi-tenant, on-premise, GDPR ready, to really automate full phone call conversations. And I would like to speak a little bit about the peculiarities about speech to text and what we see in the industry and what are the choices you have, and also about text to speech, what is important in this area. Phone call automation, as you know, could have a lot of benefits, from assisting employees while the AI is listening in, the AI is basically typing in reports, automating workflows, or answering the call itself, getting the information from the customer and then handing over to a human being, or taking the call automatically, like an inbound call from the customer, handle the complete conversation. Of course, speech to text, understanding what the customer is saying, natural language understanding and NLP, natural language processing, to automate the conversation, like detecting entities or intents, as well as synthesizing speech. Or the AI calls in an outbound call a certain employee, customer, or even a supplier. The key takeaways I would like to mention for you to take home after this presentation about speech technologies and speech synthesis is that speech recognition already works really, really well out of the box for general use cases. If you take your mobile phone and you hit the microphone button, it transcribes actually really, really good. However, if it's not good enough, then you have a problem, or you need to look for specified solutions which are highly tunable and optimizable. For example, what we do in the area of radio signals in airports, or phone calls, which is telephone, which is 8 kilohertz, super low quality, and so on. For this, you need specific solutions that you can train and optimize, because the user experience is the most important thing. And user experience means good understanding and basically high accuracy rates or low word error rates in speech recognition. The second thing is that text-to-speech produces already really, really nice voices. You hear them every time when you talk to your Alexa. I hope she's not answering right now. Alexa or Voices or Google Assistant and so on. However, it only needs 5 to 10 hours to achieve really, really good results. So with 5 or 10 hours voice recording of one of your employees, you can produce a branded voice for your company. And this is actually one of the keys. So it's a branding question. The third thing is if you think about making or buying a speech recognition solution, maybe from a cloud vendor or a specific vendor, or make it yourself, there are 3 things you need to take into consideration. One is, does it fit to your use case in terms of content, channel, and control? And I mention a little bit later what I mean with these terms. And second, the availability of skills in your company. Do you have data scientists on your disposal, or really good software engineers to really have your use case covered? And the third thing is the time to market / timeline for your use case, which depends really on what you want to achieve and what the difficulty of your use case is. So if you look at speech recognition, everyone knows these devices, right? So I don't need to go into details. However, when you talk about language technology, you should not forget the very simple ones in the bottom right, like typical phone systems, which are 30 years old and everywhere installed in offices or call centers, which is also part of these language technologies. And there, a lot of AI models and speech recognition are not available in the cloud for these systems. Voice assistants are used basically almost everywhere. And what we see is that using voice assistants in the car, GPRS, is quite common. However, it moves, and the trend will go into the workplace and more into public usage of these voice assistants. So the popularity is quite increasing, and there's huge potential in voice user interfaces in the future. In speech recognition, the question is, why is the speech recognition already a commodity or not? You see all these cloud providers and on your mobile phone on Android, it's basically working out of the box. So you might think, this is actually a commodity which I can buy off the shelf and don't need to worry about it. However, it's not that easy. It really depends on the use case. And it's dependent on 3 variables. The first is content. Depending on what you want to transcribe, for example, is it news, is it daily words, is it dialect, is it a language mix? So people are used to talking, for example, in German and mixing in English words and switch back again. Is it specific languages, specific domain, or is it just a single keyword you would like to spot when it comes to speech recognition? The second thing is channel. And here you might think speech technology is the same no matter what kind of channel you use. It's not true. It really depends if it's a phone, it's a mobile phone, it was a voice IP phone, is it a radio signal, is it a high quality speaker like an Alexa or Google Home, a multi far field microphones are there. It really depends on these kind of channels, which kind of speech recognition solutions or AI models you can use. So for example, you cannot use a telephone AI model for phone with 8 kilohertz to do radio signal transcription. It will not work at all. Or to put in a voice assistant, for example, as a mobile app, it will just make a lot of mistakes. The third thing is control. It really depends on how much control you need in your use case. Is it real-time speech recognition, or is it okay to upload an audio file and wait for an hour or so to be transcribed, or patch recognition? So it really depends how much control you need. Is it do you want to use your own text or audio samples to improve speech recognition for better accuracy, or do you want to buy something off the shelf? There are also a lot of companies out there at the moment who are just recording audio data for telephone conversations. The big players for the assistants like Alexa or Google have even a whole cloud annotation fleet, so to say, of employees who listen in and annotate these samples. Actually, already met someone sitting in a Starbucks coffee shop here in Vienna. It was quite interesting discussion. It's also about cloud versus on-premise. Is it really okay to stream something into the cloud? Think about social security numbers or diagnose data in with medical conditions. If you can really use something which is somewhere deployed, not on your data centers. And it's also the optimization for cost and quality. If you buy something off the shelf, it's difficult to really tune it for infrastructure cost, for transcription quality. So there you buy something as a black box. So if you look for commodity solutions in the cloud, they are available and they cover basically these red highlighted elements like news, daily words, or single keyword, stop words, high quality recordings from high quality microphones or voice IP phones, and it's in the cloud. If you look for best of breed solutions, you need to look what kind of solution you're looking for, which languages are these solutions optimized for, and what type of channels and content as well do you want to use for speech recognition. So it really depends if it's commodity or if you want to use or you need to use best of breed. Build versus buy is also an interesting question because there are a lot of open source frameworks out there like Kaldi, or NVIDIA recently released Nemo. TensorFlow even provides a Jupyter notebook where you can actually train your own speech recognition AI model from scratch. Be aware that these open source solutions require a lot of data science skills, machine learning skills, and deep learning skills, and also language, computer linguists and language skills to really make work nicely. It's very fast to get these solutions to work, probably 3 or 4 days. However, optimizing it and fine-tuning it, it takes a lot of work. So if you have a specific use case, you need training or you need higher speed in the recognition or higher accuracy, it's better to buy something from a specialized company. For example, for news, Hensoldt, you already heard, talking about a bit, or On the Wall for phone calls. There are also other solutions out there for specific languages, for specific domains, and for specific use cases. The next area would like to talk a little bit about is text synthesis, so text to speech, and I have also some examples to share. Synthesized voices are almost a commodity, depending on how you see it. So yes, they sound really nicely if you use something from Microsoft or Amazon or Nuance. However, that's actually the wrong question to ask for voice synthesis. The better question to ask is, do we need our own voice, yes or no, from a company and marketing and communication and branding perspective? Just imagine you're a bank and you have your voice on the phone, an AI voice on the phone. It might sound a bit different, or at least the customer would expect it to sound different than to something like a sportive company, or an institution where you can book your medical appointment and you need to say your medical conditions. So the voice is really a branding and marketing topic. So the question is more, do we need our own voice? Should we invest in it? Or are we enough with a branded voice from the big players off the shelf?
Just to let you know, 1 more minute. So
yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So one of the industry solutions I would like you to listen in for a second so this is basically something for Decathlon or Waveflow and have a look.
Wir haben für Sie eine Lieferung und würden diese am Freitag Nachmittag zwischen 10.
So you hear it's a little bit deep tone, right? So this was standard 2 years ago. If you look what happens in the last year, you can even achieve something like this.
But Mrs. Solomons could not resist the temptation to dabble in stolen goods, and she was found shipping washes of the wrong category.
So it's much, much better. There is also, you can also experiment with the differences between how much audio data you need for training. And if you even have only 1 hour, it sounds pretty cool.
Auch zur ethisch-moralischen Erziehung wurden die antiken Stoffe in der Phase der Frühaufklärung verstanden.
So there's only 1 hour of audio data. We have more examples on our webpage if you would like to compare those. So text-to-speech examples and text-to-speech technology can be achieved with very little audio data. However, you need to have the data science skills for it. Bring everything together, and what's the next frontier? Maybe 20 more seconds. It's a phone call, fully automated, and it looks like that.
Hello there, here is Julia speaking. I am the digital assistant of the technical help desk. I am calling you about a support ticket. Is it okay for you to talk to me?
Yes, it's okay.
I am glad to hear that. Am I speaking with Florian Beck?
Are you a robot?
Yes, I am. Is it okay for you to talk to me?
Yes.
Thank you for your trust. Am I speaking with...
So you could see that the language, the voices sound okay, and the speed is quite fast. So it really allows a fully automated phone call. So all these pieces, speech recognition, natural language understanding, NLP, and text-to-speech come into one go to really make this use case happen. So key takeaways, as mentioned at the beginning, I will skip that a little bit. I would like to say thanks a lot, and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm afraid we don't have time for questions, but there are 2 in the chat. So if you could answer here, then we will forward it to Georg, who's asking about the Turing test and whether callers have to be informed that they're talking to machine. But I'm afraid we have to hand over to Klaus to talk about machine translation so that he still has some time to talk about his topic. So if you could, thank you very much. So sorry for that. And let's hand over straight away to Klaus Fleischmann from Kaleidoscope, who will take over right now.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Dagmar. You can hear me and see me, I hope. I will start right in. So I have 13 minutes, but that should be okay. I only have 73 slides, so that should work. I'm a CEO of Kaleidoscope. Just briefly, what do we do? Kaleidoscope is our claim to fame is taking your content global. So we are working in what we call the global content process. So essentially, if you think about the company producing any kind of content, the steps in there which we help companies do efficiently is essentially creating content, of course, strategically in modules with metadata. And this is how it's done in modern systems nowadays. Then also translating that, which will be the focus of my presentation today, with all kinds of technologies in there. So translation always sounds like somebody sitting in front of a typewriter in a dark room, but it actually is a high-tech and very exciting industry out there. So whoever wants to look into something completely new, take a look into the translation industry because it's actually really exciting. And I'll be focusing on that today. Of course, you also have to manage anything from content through terminology, through workflow, through quality. All of that somehow needs to be managed and controlled if you do this on an industrial scale, which our clients do. and it also has to be delivered in many channels, mashed up, etc. And of course, increasingly, content is being analyzed, and then information is fed back. You could rewrite this a little bit so that people understand it better. There was a problem in the translation process. Maybe we want to choose a different translator next time, etc., etc. And I will obviously focus on this middle part, and particularly there's a tiny module in here, one of three that we use, technology in the translation process, which is machine translation, which we use and our clients use. And actually, I believe everybody has used already. So 10% of the audience said they have never used a language technology. I seriously doubt that. Whenever you're in the internet, it's very likely that you are using something that has touched language technology already. So when we talk about translation nowadays, and we look at how this is done, the industry is differentiating between different kinds of outputs, different kinds of processes, if you want to call it that way, with the classical one being here in the middle, which is basically humans, and then let's say more creative ones, and then more automated ones. So the FAU, which is actually a really funny abbreviation, because for those of you who speak French, they will know this actually means wrong or full of errors. But it actually means fully automated useful translation. So this is what generally is considered machine translation. So it's just translated totally automatically, no human touches it. It's completely done by the machine. Of course, the really, really important letter in here is useful. You have to define, well, what is useful? What's the purpose of a content? Do I want to, be very emotional, get somebody to cry about the content and get really involved? This is not going to work very well. If I want to tell them click on A first and then on B, that will work very well. So of course the purpose is important. And also for this good enough model, the good enough model also applies machine translation, but it has a human in the loop, a human that will review the text and make sure that there's no errors in it, or even review it. There's different intensities of review it so that it actually reads really well. And again, the big question is good enough for what? So as long as you don't know what the purpose of the text is, you cannot really say whether this has been good enough or not. So the bottom line is, whenever on an industrial scale you engage in any sort of multilingual content production, you have to take a step back and define the expectations and the quality expectations. Very similar to what Andreas actually said. It depends very much on the context. What do you want to achieve? What kind of voice in your example do you want to produce? And in my example, what kind of content are you producing? And of course, there are definitions about what language quality is, contrary to what many people believe, that language has like no clearly objective quality definition. It actually has. So here's one that actually comes out of Europe as well, is now widely used in, strangely, in the US standard, but not in the European standard. And they talk a lot about specifications. So you need to specify, what am I looking for in my texts? And what we do internally when we evaluate different kinds of content of a customer in terms of, can this be machine translated or not? And I'm sorry, it's German, but I assume that a lot of you speak German. If not, you can machine translate it in the background into English. I actually machine translated it here in a little bit. So we look at things like, okay, what's the medium? What's the target audience? Obviously, is it internal? Is it consumers? Is it B2B? What's the channel? Is it audio? Is it video, etc.? And then some text specific. So is it important to be idiomatic? Is terminology important? All of these different things, and they will give us a score that say, okay, well, this is good enough. The good enough approach is fine for this particular context, for example, online help. But if we're looking at UI text, so software labels that are on a software interface, very, very difficult to translate with full machine translation, because it has all these very strict requirements to the quality. What are the challenges to machine translation and current quality? The biggest challenge is neural machine translation output reads really, really well. It never reads garbled up and very strange grammatically, but it can just simply be wrong. For example, very small details. We have the same German verb here. It was translated the same way in English, but it's just wrong. If I say never leave children near a machine, that's something else than what's being said here in the German. So you cannot leave the unit unattended. That's fine. But you don't want to leave the children near a machine, which means leave them there and walk away. You don't want to let them get close to a machine. So it's a small difference, but it can be life or death if you mistranslate that, of course. So very important to really look at it. Bias, actually very interesting. There was a question about that. Yes, so AI is biased. Here's a funny example from Estonian into English, and you can clearly see it's sexist. Google Translation is sexist. And actually, it's not Google Translate, it's the data out there, right? Because it's the data that it uses to build the engines that become sexist. So I'm sorry, he's the CEO, not she. That's just the way it is in the data world out there. But as we also heard already, there's a lot of research going into trying to figure this out, because particularly if we know that we're talking about the same person, then we should be able to say, well, we're talking about a woman all the time, so very likely she's the CEO in this particular case. There's some other challenges around there, but since I need to catch up 3 minutes, I will keep going. One of the biggest problems, particularly if you are in, let's say, the content production industry, is the question of terminology. We already heard that in the presentation of Andreas also, that once you have company-specific words, it gets tricky, it gets difficult. So here I have another example for you, German into English. I'm sorry, but with bilingual examples, I always have to use one foreign language at least. So we have pretty good translation of all of this until we come to this sentence here, where it says the spraying sweat sparks can cause painful burns, which makes you wonder a little bit, what are spraying sweat sparks and why do they cause burns? So clearly it's a terminological problem. It was Schweißfunken in German, for those of you who understand German. This has to do with welding and not with sweating. But that machine didn't know that. And it's really, really difficult to date to train machine translation engines on terminology. So this is obviously, there's a lot of research going into this as well. But it's very, very important to get terminology right. And the way to do it currently is to make sure your training data is correct. So you need to curate your training data first and make sure that's okay. And in order to even be able to tell whether your training data is okay or not, you need to have terminology. So that's really is important to invest in that early on. Just a few words on machine translation engines in general. I'm not going to go into the whole story of it. Important, it's not new. It's been around for a very, very long time. For the longest time, it was said, well, in the next 10 years, we will have complete human parity in machine translation. It's still being said today, and we still don't have human parity, although human parity always depends on what humans do you compare it to. Internally, our translators always say, a good machine translation engine is already way better than a bad human translator. So it depends on what human you translate it, you compare it with. But of course, nowadays we're talking only about neural machine translations, although of course there are statistical engines out there that are super specialized that will just remain there because neural cannot get better. But even inside neural, there's two very, very big differences. There is what's called baseline engines. So like Google, for example, or Microsoft. Microsoft is a little bit trainable already, or DeepL, the most famous one in the German-speaking world, of course, because it is German. And there are custom engines. So custom engines are engines that you can build for a particular use case, for a client in our case, or for a particular subject matter, and that you can really train on specific terminology. Baseline engines are generally available in the cloud. Immediately, we have a GDPR problem in Europe. Am I allowed to send this to the cloud? Even though the providers sometimes say we don't store it, well, that's okay, but will they sign your data processing agreement or not? Very few cloud providers actually sign that, which means you have to make sure you don't send sensitive data there, and that's a little bit tricky, as we all know. They are good, they're cheap, super cheap. There's absolutely no way we can match any prices of Google or Microsoft or DeepL when it comes to general baseline engines. Super easy to implement because really you don't need to implement anything. You just take your document, send it there, receive it back. That's it, no implementation. Custom engine, of course, are different. Very often they're also on-premise engines. So these are also often engines of very sensitive data. Ministries, secret services, things like that. They obviously don't want to get outside, so they will very often be on-premise. You can train them. You can also tune them. So that means if a translator says, oh, you got that wrong, the engine is able to learn and hopefully next time not commit that same mistake again. They're not cheap. They're not easy to implement, but of course they are fast, which is the main advantage of these engines. If you are interested in doing that, you probably have to start evaluating different engines, because what engine is good for you is very, very dependent on what language combination do you have. German as a source language is not easy. English as a source language is much, much easier. It depends on the subject matter. It depends on, do you need a customizable engine or not? There are also very, very different pricing modules, ranging from completely free to, like, I don't know, pay me something for each word that you put through there. So very, very different models. So what you have to look into probably is some sort of an evaluation process. If you really want to do this on an industrial, professional level, you will need to evaluate different engines and determine which of these engines is the best one for my particular context. So what you see is, it's not that easy if you want to do this professionally and not just use a baseline engine. It requires a lot of know-how. There are very few people out there in the world. University of Vienna is trying to change that, fortunately, but there are not a lot of people that know how to do these things. So it's difficult. And what we offer to customers or companies on the one hand side is, well, exactly this knowledge. So we can help you evaluate, train, tune. We also host engines if you don't want to have it in the cloud. But we also offer it as a service. So we offer machine translation with light review, meaning we will check to make sure there's no errors, or with full review, which essentially means it should theoretically be more or less the same as a completely human output, but of course a lot faster. And that brings me, I caught up 3 minutes, so I'm proud. And I don't know if there are any questions. Otherwise, I also have my email address here, so feel free to send me an email. Thanks a lot.
Okay, so thank you so much for this great presentation and very interesting insight in an industry perspective, and also in another field of language technology developed in Austria, and very, very nice. So thank you, Andreas Rath, and also Klaus Fleischmann, for joining us in the ELG workshop and presenting the Austrian language technology industry perspective. So I think we have to close, because the next session is already about to start. To finish off, I would like to thank everyone for joining today, and thank all our speakers for those very interesting presentations. I would also, of course, like to thank my co-moderator, Gerhard, and of course the technical support team. So thanks a lot for your consistent support and professional help. So contact us if you have any further questions, and get engaged, get started with ELG and language technologies. It's a great field. So thanks a lot, and hopefully see you and talk to you live again soon.